In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on January 26, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. New York Islanders versus Philadelphia Flyers. Islanders at Flyers on Monday, January 26, 2026 sets the stage for a classic Metro clash in Philadelphia. You get that familiar rivalry vibe here, same city noise, same colors on the ice, and only a tiny gap in the standings separating these two. The Islanders skate in just 2 points ahead of the Flyers in the division, but they are trailing 0-2 in the season series, and both of those losses have come by a single goal, which stings a bit more than a blowout. Odds makers are treating this like a coin flip, nudging the Flyers as a very small home favorite around -115 with the Islanders around -105 at most books, so the market is basically shrugging and saying, you pick. On the surface, that seems fair, but once you look a little closer at how these teams actually win games, the scales start to tilt more than those prices suggest. New York leans hard on structure and a top 5 defensive profile, giving up just under 2.8 goals per game while often grinding to reach 3 goals themselves. They are not trying to race anyone, they are trying to suffocate you, slow the tempo, and make every shot feel like pulling teeth. Philadelphia, by contrast, sits closer to league average at both ends, scoring roughly 3 and allowing a bit over 3 per night, with a goal differential that is slightly underwater even after that eye-catching upset in Colorado a couple of nights ago. That win looks great on a highlight reel, but it does not erase months of tape where this defense and this net-minding group have looked pretty ordinary. Here is the thing that really nudges this matchup for me. The Islanders have enjoyed much stronger goaltending over the season, with Ilya Sorokin in that mid-2 goals against range and carrying a save percentage north of .910, while the Flyers' healthy goalies are sitting above 3 goals against with clearly weaker save percentages. New York also brings a much better penalty kill, which matters in a game that already feels like it could turn into a series of 1-goal swings. They have been living in that low-event world, stacking up tight wins, holding a neutral goal differential, and staying ahead of Philly in the Metro by squeezing extra points out of coin flip games. Philadelphia still has that dangerous if they get hot label, and you can absolutely see it in flashes, like when they hang a 7 spot in Denver and suddenly look like world beaters for a night. But underneath that, this is still a middling defense dealing with a thin blue line and some key absences. Their top goalie Dan Vladar is on injured reserve with a lower body issue. Depth pieces such as Rodrigo Abols and Rasmus Ristolainen are also stuck on IR, and high-upside winger Tyson Forster is out for months after arm surgery, which leaves them leaning on backups and a defense group that has to work a little too hard. They also take enough penalties that you start to worry about fatigue, especially when the team on the other bench is perfectly happy to turn this into a grind. So what you end up with is a near pick'em price, a loud home crowd, and a matchup where the stronger defensive structure, better goaltending, and tighter special teams all sit on the visiting bench. Honestly, in that kind of setup, I am more than willing to let the public pay the tiny premium for the Flyers at home, while quietly siding with the team that is better built for 1 goal, low-drama hockey. As our first pick for this matchup, the New York Islanders money line is our full game side pick. Now shifting to the scoring environment and the total, this game has a slightly different personality. It looks messy in recent box scores. It feels like it could blow open because it is a rivalry, but the underlying tendencies are a lot more conservative than the surface level suggests. Books are hanging a number in that mid-5 to 6 goal neighborhood, with DraftKings listing a 5.5 and alternate 6.5 options, and other shops hovering between 5 and 6 as well. That kind of total implies a game that is just a bit more open than what these two have actually been giving us on average. Season long, the Islanders are pretty much a poster child for please let this finish 3-2 and nobody get cute. They sit in the bottom third of the league in goals scored, yet they are among the top 5 in goals allowed, pairing a bottom 2 power play with a top 10 penalty kill. So they do not score much, but they also do not give you much, and their special teams do not exactly invite fireworks. It is the hockey version of a low-scoring baseball game where the bullpen is the main character. The Flyers bring more noise, at least visually. They average roughly 3 goals for and a bit over 3 against per night, yet their power play is still stuck in the bottom tier and their penalty kill grades out only as average. Strip away the logos on the chest, and what you really see is one high-end defensive team and one middle-of-the-pack team, both tied to special teams that rarely turn whistles into automatic goals. Recent results mess with your perception, and that is where bettors sometimes get into trouble. Yes, the Flyers have played some games that look like pond hockey on paper, including that 7-3 win in Colorado, a 5-4 game in Utah, and a 6-3 result against the Rangers. Those scores scream track meet when you scroll through an app on your phone, but they sit on top of a longer run where Philadelphia grades out as roughly league average in scoring, not as some secret offensive juggernaut hiding from the models. On the other bench, the Islanders are coming off a rough stretch too, including a 5-0 loss to Buffalo and a 4-1 loss in Seattle. Even that slump still fits their usual script though. Over their last 5 games, they have only scored 8 total goals, and their season ranking still has them among the stingiest defenses in the league. Their goaltending core is healthy for this one, outside of long-term injuries like Kyle Palmieri and short-term issues for Ryan Pulock, and all of that is already baked into the numbers you see on the board. Put all of that into one picture, and the total starts to feel a bit high. You have one team that wins with suffocating defense, another that just blew out a strong opponent but is still missing key depth pieces and its starting goalie, and both groups are skating around with ugly power play percentages and no real special teams cheat code. This shapes up closer to a playoff-style divisional game where every neutral zone mistake gets you a death stare from the bench, not some all-star skills competition with end-to-end rushes every shift. Sure, hockey is random, and one weird bounce can set off a scoring avalanche, but if you lean on the matchup, the current season data, and the way these teams actually like to play, the safer assumption is that the scoring stays on a shorter leash than the number suggests. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Boston Bruins versus New York Rangers. Madison Square Garden on a Monday night has that weird buzz where the building is half business trip and half circus, and this game fits that mood perfectly. You have Boston skating and like a team that suddenly remembered its reputation, and New York looking at its season the way you stare at a group project you were supposed to start weeks ago. Oddsmakers keep things pretty tight here, with Boston sitting as a small road favorite in about the -115 range and the Rangers hanging near even money, which is pretty wild when you remember that New York's home record sits at a rough 5-13-4, and the confidence there has been spilling out just as fast as the goals against. Boston is not flawless, and they still have their warts, but there is a real structure to the way they move as a group. They toughened up the lower lines, leaned into a nastier, more honest style, and still let that top group built around David Pastrnak and Morgan Geekie pull the offense along like a tugboat dragging the rest of the roster out of trouble. You watch them for a few shifts and it is pretty clear that even when the play gets messy, they tend to reset into something that actually looks like a plan. Across the ice, the Rangers feel a lot more fragile right now. New coach on the bench, blue line shuffled, and the 2 players who are supposed to be the security system at the back, Adam Fox and Igor Shesterkin, are still out of the picture for this one. Shesterkin is not expected to just appear out of nowhere, and Fox is still stuck waiting on the calendar, which leaves New York trying to patch the most important parts of the house while the storm is already overhead. That sets up a likely goaltending matchup of Jeremy Swayman against Jonathan Quick, and it is funny, because on paper that sounds like a coin flip, but the context around them is anything but. One of those guys is riding with a team that has taken 4 of its last 5 games, playing like it found a ladder out of last year's basement and is not eager to go back. The other has been living through 4 losses in 5, with scorelines that feel more like late-night beer league than a spring contender, and you can almost feel the tension in every rebound. In a price range that is close enough to feel like a coin toss, when you put the healthier core, the more reliable defensive structure, and the hotter current form on the same side, the picture starts to tilt in a pretty obvious direction. As our first pick for this matchup, the Boston Bruins money line is our full game side pick. Now, shifting over to the total, this matchup is a bit of a trick. On paper, the names say tight, playoff-style chess match, and you can imagine a low-scoring grinder where every mistake feels fatal. Then you look at the recent box scores and they read more like a pinball machine, and suddenly the vibe changes completely. Boston has been living in that higher scoring neighborhood for a while, putting up more than 3 goals a night on average and giving up just over 3. 4 of their last 5 games have reached at least 6 total goals, and a few of those did not just sneak over the line, they blew straight past it. You can tell by watching, even without staring at spreadsheets, that their games tend to open up once both teams settle in. The Rangers, for their part, have taken the word chaos pretty seriously lately. Across their last 5, they have allowed goal totals of 3, 4, 5, 3, and 8, which is exactly the kind of stretch that makes anyone who likes betting under suddenly reconsider all their life choices. Only one of those games stayed under 6 total goals, and most of them soared past that mark with room to spare. When you stack the season averages together, the picture makes sense. Boston sits in that 3.31 goals for and 3.10 against zone, while New York sits around 2.63 for and 3.12 against. Add that up and you are already in a 6+ goal environment before you even talk about context, and the context here is pretty loud. New York is missing its star defenseman and its #1 goalie, which strips away 2 of the main reasons a total would stay low, and it leaves a game that is much more open to swings and momentum spikes. Odds makers have acknowledged all this by hanging a total of 6.5 and leaning a bit toward the under, almost as if they are daring people to trust the recent chaos to keep going. Here is the thing though, neither projected starter is exactly on a heater right now. Both Jonathan Quick and Jeremy Swayman have been sitting below a .88 save percentage over the last month, which is really just the cold, dry statistical way of saying that the puck has been finding the net a lot more often than either of them would like. Layer in a Boston power play that has been humming along at a strong rate and a Rangers penalty kill that is solid but hardly suffocating, and you start to imagine long stretches of offensive zone time turning into quality looks instead of harmless perimeter shots. Games like this have a funny rhythm. They might start tight, feel cautious for 10 minutes, and then one bounce or one odd man rush cracks the thing open, and suddenly both benches loosen the reins a bit. With both recent form and season averages pointing to a game where scoring chances are not exactly in short supply, it is hard not to lean toward a script where the scoreboard gets plenty of work. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Los Angeles Kings versus Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus comes into this matchup with the swagger of a team that refused to fold when it easily could have. Their record sits at 24-20-7 and 6 wins in the last 7 games after hanging 8 on Tampa and snapping the Lightning's 15-game point streak give the room a very real sense that the season still has teeth. That kind of night, where you blow the doors off a contender that has not lost in a while, feels a bit like cashing a ticket you almost talked yourself out of. It sticks with a group. Since Rick Bowness stepped behind the bench on January 12th and started hammering home structure and small details, the chaos has settled into something that actually looks like a plan on the ice. You see it in that tight 1-0 win over Dallas, where Jet Greaves locked down his 3rd career shutout and Zach Werenski supplied the only goal, a win that feels more like a quiet statement than a headline. Columbus is no longer just trading chances and hoping, they are actually squeezing games, and that matters when you are talking about trusting a favorite. On the other side, Los Angeles sits at 21-16-13 and pretty much lives in 1-goal land most nights, which is exciting for neutrals but stressful if you are backing them regularly. They roll into this spot at the start of a 6-game, 9-day road trip that opened with a 5-4 shootout win in St. Louis, the kind of start that is fun on the scoreboard but also hints at how draining this stretch could become. The identity is still built around a conservative, defense-first approach under Jim Hiller. They are not blowing teams out of the water. They are just surviving coin flip endings over and over, and that routine can wear thin. Roster-wise, Anze Kopitar shows on the Kings sheet but is tagged on injured reserve on the game listing, while Columbus is missing Dante Fabro and Miles Wood, both listed with the Blue Jackets but out, so neither bench is actually at full strength. That matters, but it does not erase the feel of the matchup. You have Nationwide Arena buzzing again, a home team that just found out it can both win a track meet and grind out a 1-0, a goalie in Greaves who currently looks calm instead of frantic, and a Kings group just starting a heavy, compressed road swing that can mess with rhythm and legs. The market still respects Los Angeles enough to keep this number tight, but if you put all those pieces on the whiteboard and ask which side you would rather be tied to for 3 periods, the slight home favorite angle is the one that keeps making sense when you come back to it in your head. As our first pick for this matchup, the Columbus Blue Jackets money line is our full game side pick. Both books and bettors are circling this total in that mid-6 range, with a pretty clear lean toward the lower side of things, and once you look at how these two actually like to play right now, it tracks. Los Angeles has been one of the stingiest outfits in the league since last season, and even after tweaking into a more aggressive 1-2-2 look, the backbone stayed the same: slow the game, smother chances, and turn most nights into 3-2 style decisions. For a long stretch, they sat near the very top of the league in goals against per game, and the current roster is still wired to think first about structure, then about style. Their recent results read like a playlist you have heard before if you follow this team much: 5-4, 4-3, 2-1, 3-2, 3-2, almost all one-goal finishes that hinge on a bounce, a screen, or one bad pinch. Even when the totals land on the higher side, it often feels like a controlled burn rather than chaos, and that is a small but important difference when you are thinking about how many goals a game truly wants to have. Columbus, at first glance, screams high scoring to a lot of people. You see 3.00 goals for 3.29 against on the season, plus that 8-5 circus against Tampa, and the instinct is to pull the slider toward a shootout script. But under bonus, there is a slow shift toward discipline, toward accepting that boring can be profitable. That same recent stretch that gave us the wild one also includes the 1-0 shutout of Dallas and a 4-1 very controlled win over Vancouver, games that land well under a 6.5 type number and feel deliberately managed. Add in that both teams played 2 nights ago, so there is just enough fatigue baked into the legs and decision-making, and the Kings are in that classic road trip survival mode where coaches lean even harder on safe routes off the glass and conservative changes. You can almost picture both benches quietly agreeing to a chess match instead of a track meet, especially if the first period settles without a track-style start. When you weigh all of that together, the more likely script does not look like another 8-goal fireworks show. It looks more like 3-2 or 3-1, the kind of game where every shot feels a little heavier because there are not many of them to spare. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Utah Mammoth versus Tampa Bay Lightning. Utah rolling into this game feels a bit like the ambitious new neighbor who moved in, borrowed the furniture, and somehow turned the place into a sleek contender before anyone finished unpacking boxes. They come in at 27-20-4, riding that 5-game win streak and 9-game point streak, and the way they are winning tells you plenty. They are not a chaos team. They are a do-your-job, every shift kind of team, built around structure, layers, and the patience to play the long game shift after shift. You see it in the season profile: roughly 3.20 goals scored per night, around 2.77 allowed, a healthy plus 22 goal differential, and special teams that are more workmanlike than flashy, which is exactly what a serious, still growing group usually looks like at this stage. They are not trying to surprise anyone anymore. They are trying to prove they belong in every rink they walk into. The catch is that they are still learning what it feels like when the road really punches back. Utah away from home is a very human 12-13-2, and this spot comes on the heels of that 5-2 win in Nashville, where they burned plenty of fuel clawing back after an early deficit. Second leg of an Eastern swing, travel in the legs, and another big stage waiting for them is a different kind of test than rolling at home with last change and fresh energy. And now they walk into a building where the hosts are not only better rested in goal, but also just had their ego dented on national highlight loops. Tampa, on the other hand, feels like the experienced heavyweight that still owns the room, even with a couple of important pieces in street clothes. They are sitting at 32-14-4 with 162 goals scored and 119 allowed, top 3 in the league in both production and prevention, which is a pretty rude combo for anyone trying to stage an upset in their barn. That 15-game point streak that just got snapped in that 8-5 track meet in Columbus is a reminder of their baseline more than a warning sign. They do not normally live in those Wild West scorelines. They usually smother games, squeeze time and space, and make you feel like every clean look took 3 shifts of work to earn. Columbus was the exception, not the rule, and teams that get embarrassed like that rarely shrug and move on. They usually come home with a very sharp edge. Oddsmakers clearly see that gap in proven ceiling and say it out loud with the price. Most books are hanging Tampa in that -175 neighborhood on the money line, with Utah floated in the mid-plus 140s range, and that spread is sitting there even though the Mammoth are the hot story and the Lightning are missing star power down the middle and on the blue line. Braden Point is still shelved, Victor Hedman is on the mend, and the defensive group has been stitched together around names like J.J. Moser and Darren Radish logging heavier minutes than they were originally penciled in for. Yet the attack still has a true top-tier feel with Nikita Kucherov and Jake Guentzel driving the offense, and that is before you even talk about the safety net behind them. In all likelihood, Andrei Vasilevskiy gets the crease here after Jonas Johansson took the brunt of that Columbus shooting gallery, and that is a meaningful swing in tone for the home side. Utah counters with Karel Vejmelka, who has quietly stacked up an NHL leading win total for the season, plus a skater group fronted by Clayton Keller, Dylan Guenther, and Mikhail Sergachev that can absolutely hang in a playoff-style game. The issue is that they are still missing Logan Cooley on a longer timeline, and Lawson Krause is just coming off an illness tag, which means he is either not quite himself or still in that ease-him-back zone where minutes and matchups get managed carefully. That chips away at their margin for error, especially in a building where Tampa's 13-9-0 home record comes with a lot of games where they have calmly closed the door once they grab a lead. So you end up with this really clear dynamic, the rising program that wants to prove it belongs on the same marquee skate for skate, walking into the house of a team that already knows exactly how good it is and just got a very loud reminder not to take nights off. Home ice, deeper playoff resume, the better-rested goaltender, and a track record of tilting 5-on-5 play all lean the same direction. And that is ultimately where this moneyline argument lands. As our first pick for this matchup, the Tampa Bay Lightning money line is our full game side pick. Now, if you zoom out from who wins and just think about how this game is likely to feel on the scoreboard, the picture gets pretty fun. The total is sitting at 6.5 at most shops, and everything about how these two have been playing lately suggests we are in for a night where the red light operator gets a bit of cardio. Tampa has been living in that 4 goals or more territory in 7 of its last 10 outings, and they are second in the league in goals per game while still sitting inside the top 3 for goals against, which is a bit like having a sports car that also gets great mileage. They can run with anyone, but when they lock in defensively, they do not suddenly turn into a low-skill grind. They just smother chances while still threatening to score in bunches. Utah, for their part, is not riding smoke and mirrors here. This current heater has included nights with 5, 6, and 5 goals scored, and that 3.2 goals per game season clip is not an empty stat line. It reflects a group that has learned how to generate honest offense from structure, not just hope for breakaways. When you drop that style into a matchup with a team that actually likes to play aggressively and attack off the rush, you usually do not get a sleepy chess match. You get a game where one push triggers another, then another. It is a bit like 2 strong tennis players who both prefer to hit big serves. You can talk about defense all you want, but momentum tends to swing fast and the scoreboard keeps moving. If you look at the rhythm of their games, both teams tend to land in that 6 to 7 combined goal corridor more often than not. Tampa's average night settles right around 6 total goals, and Utah's average lives in the low 6s. But when you zoom in on Utah's last 10, the number creeps closer to 7 once you bake in all the empty net drama and late swings they have been dealing in. That is important because in modern hockey, endgame chaos is where a lot of totals are won or lost, and both of these clubs are perfectly willing to pull the goalie early or chase a comeback deep into the third rather than quietly accepting a 2-goal defeat. Stylistically, this matchup does not scream slow it down and chip it out for either bench. Utah is too confident right now to turtle for 60 minutes, and if they sit back, they are basically inviting Tampa's transition game to tee off on them. So they almost have to trade chances in stretches, which feeds right into the Lightning's comfort zone of quick strikes off turnovers and stretch passes through the neutral zone. You sprinkle in a Tampa power play that remains dangerous even with some star pieces in the press box, against a Utah penalty kill that is solid but not terrifying, and the door is open for at least 1 or 2 special teams goals sneaking into the box score. Now, here is the one thing that keeps this from being a just read the scoreboard now situation. The 2 goaltenders are legitimately good enough to spoil everyone's fun on any given night. Vasilevskiy is tracking in that sweet spot around a 2.1 to 2.2 goals against average with a save percentage in the high .916 to .918 neighborhood, which is exactly the profile of a goalie who can single-handedly keep a total under even when the flow tilts toward chaos. At the other end, Vejmelka has pushed his way to 25 wins already with roughly a 2.57 goals against and about a .90 save rate, so he is more than capable of stealing big chunks of the game if Utah's structure in front of him holds up. If both guys are dialed in, you can absolutely get a more muted script that lands in that 3-2 or 4-2 range and leaves everyone holding an over-ticket muttering to themselves afterwards. But when you fold in the context, the lean shifts. Tampa is coming off that 8-5 circus in Columbus, which will make them want to tighten details, but it also reinforces how quickly their games can burst open once they get rolling. Playing at home, they are also more likely to be in the position where score effects kick in late, whether that is protecting a lead and facing an empty net, or chasing one and throwing extra attackers over the boards. Utah, meanwhile, is on a run where their offense simply refuses to disappear, even in tougher buildings, and that kind of collective confidence tends to show up on the scoreboard more often than not. Put all of that together, and this does not feel like a night that dies quietly at 4 or 5 total. It feels like a game that naturally drifts into that 6 or 7 goal window with very real paths to a late insurance marker or empty netter nudging it past the number rather than stalling short. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Anaheim Ducks versus Edmonton Oilers. Anaheim rolling into Edmonton like this feels less like a regular Monday and more like a reality show episode where the producers got a little too excited about drama. They just emptied the tank in Calgary in that wild 4-3 overtime comeback, capped by Beckett Senecki's first NHL hat trick, and stretched their win streak to 7 in a row. Now they hop a short flight, reset in another Canadian winter city, and have to do it all again against a rested Oilers group that has been sitting at home waiting for them. On paper, the market is very clear about who is supposed to take care of business. Edmonton is at home in Rogers Place, sitting at 26-19-8, and sitting near the top of the Pacific. Anaheim is right on their heels at 28-21-3, which is a sentence nobody would have believed a couple of years ago, especially with their goal differential still in the red. Odds makers are pricing this like a heavyweight versus a scrappy challenger, with Edmonton sitting in that roughly -250 range and Anaheim floating out in +200 territory. So from a pure numbers screen, it looks like a classic. Do you really want to step in front of this favorite spot? Here is where the story under the hood matters more than a quick glance at the standings. Edmonton's offense is not just good, it is the kind of problem that keeps penalty kills up at night. They are one of the top scoring teams in the league at a bit over 3.3 goals per game, and they own the best power play in hockey at roughly 31.8%, which is ridiculous over a full season. They can turn a sleepy game into a track meet with one-man advantage, one loose stick, one bad line change. That is exactly the profile that usually deserves to be a big home favorite. But Anaheim is not skating around like a typical underdog right now. They profile like one of those teams that refuses to read the script. They score just over 3.2 a night, they give up almost 3.5, and they live in chaos, which is how you end up with a negative goal differential and still sit firmly in the playoff picture. They also lead the league in extra time wins, already in double digits, which is basically the universe screaming coin flip hockey every other night. If you like drama, you love this team. If you bet against them as a big dog, you probably do not. That Calgary game is a perfect little microcosm. They get caved in early, look cooked, then somehow climb off the mat, push it to overtime, and steal 2 points, which has basically become their brand at this point. That style plays beautifully into a big plus money number because when your games constantly tilt into the third period with everything up in the air, the favorites' price tag starts to look a little bloated. Anaheim is not grinding out low-event one-goal wins. They are flipping coins with skill and chaos wrapped around them. Now, there is the fatigue angle that everyone will talk about. Second night of a back-to-back, emotional comeback, travel in between, all of that is real. But sometimes that can tighten a room rather than drain it. You get that nothing-to-lose feel, the bench is loose, and the group already knows it can hang with good teams because it just did it again last night. And stylistically, Edmonton is not exactly a suffocating defensive nightmare. They can leak chances when they press forward, and Anaheim loves nothing more than trading rushes when a favorite gets greedy. So you have a home juggernaut with a scary power play, properly respected by the market, going up against a road team that embraces volatility, lives in overtime, and is catching a price that assumes they are much closer to their reputation from a couple seasons ago than the group that has quietly climbed near the top half of the conference. That clash between perception and current reality is where betting value usually hides. And while nothing in hockey is ever guaranteed, especially when posts exist and pucks bounce, our projection is that Anaheim wins this game more often than the odds are giving them credit for. That is a forecast, not a certainty, but it is one backed by the current records, the schedule spot, and the way these two teams actually play right now. As our first pick for this matchup, the Anaheim Ducks money line is our full game side pick. If you shift the focus away from who wins and just think about how the game might feel, the total tells its own story. Books are hanging a lofty 6.5 here, and they are shading the over, which is the odds market's way of saying, we expect fireworks and we are not shy about it. Honestly, on first glance, that makes perfect sense. You have an Edmonton side that scores in bunches, especially at home, and runs the most lethal power play in the league. On the other bench, you have a Ducks team that scores enough, bleeds chances the other way, and has seen far more of their games land over the number than under, sitting with roughly 30-plus overs against high teens unders depending on how each shop grades closing totals. So the total is not pulled from thin air. It is built off real scoring rates, power play efficiency, and a track record of Anaheim games turning into roller coasters. But totals are not just about season averages, they are about the specific night. Here's the thing, context can quietly drag a game away from the script everyone expects. Anaheim is walking into this building after spending a lot of emotional capital in Calgary. Comebacks like that feel amazing, but they are exhausting, and the second night of a back-to-back on the road has a way of nudging coaches toward a more conservative template. Shorter shifts, simpler exits, fewer high-risk pinch attempts, all of that chips away at the chaos that usually inflates their scores. You can almost picture the pregame speech, something like, "Keep it tight, keep it simple, do not give them free rushes." That does not guarantee a low-scoring game, but it definitely pushes against the track meet from puck drop idea. Edmonton also has more than one gear. Yes, they can run and gun, and their highlight reels are basically sponsored by rush chances. But look through their recent schedule and you see plenty of nights where they win with structure, with games that sit in that 4 or 5 total goal pocket, especially when they respect the opponent's speed and try not to feed transition chances. When their power play is humming at the rate it is, they do not actually need a game with 9 or 10 combined goals to get what they want out of the night. From a tactical angle, both benches have real incentive to keep things cleaner than the stereotype. Anaheim cannot afford a parade to the penalty box against this power play, so sticks stay lower, gaps stay tighter, and that usually means fewer reckless lunges that lead to odd man rushes the other way. Edmonton, on the flip side, knows how quickly a high-event game can turn on one bad bounce, and with how crowded the Pacific standings are, there is every reason to lean into a more measured, professional effort rather than a pond hockey night. There is also a bit of psychology baked in here. When a total is set this high and the over is that heavily priced, a lot of casual tickets stack on the expectation of a goal fest, which is exactly when an under-friendly script becomes most interesting. Think of something in the 3-2 or 4-2 range, where there is still plenty of offense, plenty of talent on display, but not quite enough chaos to clear that elevated bar. Those scoreline examples are illustrative, not literal predictions, but they show how an entertaining game can still land below a big number. So while the raw season stats shout goals, 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 the specific situation whispers this could be tighter than everyone expects. And that whisper is what we are listening to here. As with any total, this is inherently speculative, even though it leans on current season scoring rates, special teams data, and the confirmed schedule spot. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.